kind of digging into Jack's brain with some how questions he's got. If you have some how questions you want to share with us, please feel free to give us a call here in the studio. The number is 440-946-9468. That's 440-946-WINT. For those of you listening on the podcast, we're here on Mondays from noon to 1 Eastern. So even if you aren't listening live, you can also give us a call in here in the studio. I'd be happy to take your phone call. All right, so Jack, we're at the point now we're talking about the how come part of our show. We're going to have something you've been pondering for the last week or so that you want to throw out there, and we'll see how it kind of interacts and connects with a small business.
Yeah, it has been. It's actually been more than a week. It's been a while, this one. So, okay, how come politicians always say they are going to create jobs? What do they know generally about that? You know, about creating jobs. How do they know how to do that? Where did that divine intervention come from? Creating jobs are a pretty tough thing to do.
Sure it is. They come in with a magic bag of fairy dust that they sprinkle around, right? That says here's the job, fairy dust. Is that how it works, Jack?
Something like that. You know, that's usually what
or it's a magic wand.
A trail of fairy dust on the ground.
They click their heels and wiggle it. I don't know. Something.
Well, I was reading an article. I was so taken by it that I'm going to read much of it before it'll frame a little bit of a discussion here.
All right.
And it's by a guy named Brian Dean Wright. He's an ex-CIA operative, and he was writing for the Los Angeles Times. And he was talking about the next industrial revolution and how it's claiming its first victims now, and he kind of provokes a lot of thought in terms of jobs as we know it are really going away. We've sensed it, but when politicians keep saying, hey, vote for me, I'm going to create jobs, and we talk about yesterday, which is what most people do, you really don't ponder the future very much. And this guy, I think, did a pretty good job of certainly provoking it in my mind. I'm going to read a little bit of stuff, maybe a lot of stuff.
All right, so we got story time with Jack.
A little bit of story time here. So he talks about a viral video released in February showed Boston Dynamics' new bipedal robot. So they introduced a robot in February here. It's named Atlas. And it was performing human-like tasks, opening doors, tromping about in the snow, lifting and stacking boxes. Tech geeks cheered and Silicon Valley investors salivated at the potential to end human manual labor. And we've heard stories, we've seen robots do stuff, but we don't see it in mass unless you see versions of it on a factory floor once in a while. So shortly thereafter, after this episode here with Atlas, White House economists released a forecast that calculated more precisely whom Atlas and other forms of automation are going to put out of work. Most occupations that pay less than $20 an hour are likely to be, in the words of the report, this is from the White House, automated into obsolescence. In other words, the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution has found its first victims, blue-collar workers and the poor. I think we all had a sense of that to some degree, okay, but he goes on. The general response in working America is disbelief or outright denial. People are in denial here. A recent Pew Research Center survey found that 80% of Americans think their job will still exist in 50 years. And only 11% of today's workers were worried about losing their job to automation. So 50 years, we're still going to be doing the same stuff. Isn't that almost unbelievable when you stop hard and think about it?
Well, nobody thinks in terms of 50 years, so it's kind of a bogus question to ask somebody, isn't it?
Well, you got to think ahead. Things are going to end, even us, one of these days. So.
Well, I got to think about it. My point is most people don't think that way. So if you're asking somebody that question, they're going to say, well, no, of course my job will still be here, right? But they haven't thought about it, so you just ask them the question, and they aren't thinking too deeply about it at that point either, I don't think.
That's right. I would agree with that. So like his former CIA agent buddies, they insist their specialized skill and knowledge can't be replaced by artificial intelligence. That is, until they see plans for autonomous drones that don't require human hand and automated imagery analysis that outperforms the human eyes. And I like futuristic stuff. When you put your head into it, it's absolutely amazing the world ahead of us. And this isn't Star Trek worlds, it's worlds within our grasp, a generation, 20 years or so. Human workers of all stripes pound the table claiming desperately that they're irreplaceable. Bus drivers, bartenders, financial advisors, speechwriters, firefighters, umpires, even doctors and surgeons. Meanwhile, corporations are spending billions on robots and artificial intelligence towards making all those jobs replaceable. But why? Why are corporations doing that? Why do you think they're doing that, Adam? Well, I'll answer my own question. I can see you're ready to answer if I want to cut you off with it. Okay, because robots and yes, it is. Because robots and computers don't need health care, pensions, vacation days, or even salaries. They don't need political correctness, and they don't need the difficulty in the workforce. They don't need it. They just work. They do what you want it to do. Powerhouse consultancies like Mencini forecast 45% of today's workplace could be done by robots, artificial intelligence, or some other already demonstrated technology. Okay, deniers of the scope and scale of this looming economic upheaval point hopefully to retraining programs. Are you kidding me? Especially government-sponsored retraining programs?
To retrain people to do what? To turn into robots? Is that what they're going to train them to do?
That's what they're saying. Hey, there's retraining programs here that I could take.
They can fix robots.
To do what? Well, that's right. They say basically, people who we're going to need people to build and service these machines, even though right now engineers are focused on developing robots that fix themselves or each other.
Oh, see, I'm thinking of the movie Terminator, Jack, in 1984, I believe, right? And so here he was, he fixed himself, right? He got shot, here it is, he's in the mirror plucking his eye out, and he's adjusting himself, right?
That's right. Simple little stuff.
Right. So can't they fix themselves and build themselves and build each other?
Sure they can, and that's what they're doing.
A robot factory building robots. It's like having in Austin Powers. We have a factory that builds miniatures of little factories that we're talking about.
So
go ahead.
Retraining to build robots that robots can be retrained to build better than themselves for less hassle seems to be the way things are going to go.
Now, is that a robot or robot?
Two T's. Robot.
Right. I know it's one of your favorite words. That's all right.
Okay, they believe these are the deniers that such shifts, like to your point before, are many decades away. Even as noted futurist Ray Kurzweil. And he's Google's director of engineering. It's got to be way out their mind, don't you think?
Sure.
So old Ray says artificial intelligence will equal human intelligence by 2029. So this is 16 less 29. That's 13 years from now.
That's all right.
And he's a guy who's on the line right now doing this stuff with one of the biggest, smartest corporations in the world. So the deniers are digging deeper into the sand. So they talk about new jobs, and they're going to, they're assuming they're going to be created during this fourth revolution, but ain't going to happen. The World Economic Forum calculated the technological changes underway probably will destroy 7 million jobs worldwide by 2020, with only 2 million being replaced. So he goes on, but the whole gist of this, I'm not going to go on with this, but the whole gist of this is that what are we going to do, with future, what do we do to get people income? And how do you make income with jobs being lost at a rate 3 times as fast as they're being created? And the training, nobody knows quite how to train, and people working on robots are the smartest people, robots. Now you got me going. So he's suggesting all this personally, he's finding a way to fund this, and look at our personal data that we give to Google and treat it like a raw material, mining a mineral somewhere, or Alaska paying everybody for the oil bounty that they have. And he's basically saying that they're debating what will the world be right now without work. So that's a long way of going to the point of asking that question here. What is the world without work? And we're coming up to it probably within certainly the next 50 years, but I would say from these experts 25, 30 years if the technology is there, and if the technology stays harnessed and focused, it's going to happen.
So you're recommending that politicians stop talking about how they're going to create jobs since they aren't going to exist? And
that's a big...
that's a question that owners never ask about. Owners never ask that question, how do I create more jobs?
Well, we basically, and I'm going to I'm going to really throw this out because we can talk about this again sometime. I'd like to do that. But we at MVP feel the solution isn't creating another fund, although that might be part of it. But hey, if everybody knew how to start a company, and all they need to do is take their brain and find an idea and start and run a company successfully, that would go a long way to solving a lot of these problems. And we've been advocating that for quite a while. But we're going to talk more about that down the line. Not today, though.